We're streaming.
Are we?
Yeah.
Oh. I'm not seeing it. Waiting for Robert Cowan.
Might be a lag. Let's see.
Oh, there we are. Oh. I'm not seeing it. Waiting for Robert Cowan.
Might be a lag. Let's see.
Oh, there we are. Oh.
And do you have audio on yours?
I'm not seeing it. Waiting for Robert Cowan.
Might be a lag. Let's see.
Oh, there we are. Oh.
So see how they're working?
And
Is everyone getting the audio good? I'm gonna actually figure this out.
Might be a lag. Let's see.
There we are. Oh.
So see how they're working?
And
Is everyone getting the audio good? I'm gonna actually figure this out. 8 people.
Might be a lag. Let's see.
There we are. Oh.
So see how they're working? Is everyone getting the audio good? I'm gonna actually figure this out. Yay! Good morning, everyone. 10 a.m. was not a good idea for this. We like figure this out. So, your questions, the answers are going to be terrible. Good morning, everyone. 10 a.m. was not a good idea for this. We like figure this out. So, your questions, the answers are going to be terrible. Good morning, everyone. 10 a.m. was not a good idea. I think I know how to fix that. Right? Figure this out. Questions. The answers are going to be terrible. Good morning, everyone. 10 a.m. was not a good idea. I think I know how to fix that. Right? Figure this out. Your questions. The answers are going to be terrible. Good morning, everyone. 10 a.m. was not a good idea. I think I know how to fix that. Right? Figure this out. Your questions. The answers are going to be terrible. Good morning, everyone. 10 a.m. was not a good idea. I think I know how to fix that. Right? Figure this out. Your questions. The answers are going to be terrible.
You're so was
good morning, everyone. 10 a.m. was not a good idea. I think I know how to fix that. Right? Figure this out.
Your YouTube preview.
Your questions. The answers are going to be terrible.
Your
so was
good morning, everyone. 10 a.m. was not a good idea. I think I know how to fix that. Right? Figure this out.
Your YouTube.
How's that? Is that better?
Are we looping?
Are we looping? How's that working out? I think we're good. Yeah, because I had the YouTube video still up, so it was looping back. So I think that should be good. We still good?
Woo! Thanks, Pierce.
Yes. I'm figuring it out. Livestream 15. Smooth sailing. Any questions yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Somebody requested dubstep.
Well, I mean, you know.
All right. Got our first question.
Okay.
From Eric Mueller. How do you deal with design indecision or designer's block?
Oh.
Which is good for right now.
So that is a great question. Eric? Yeah, Eric was asking about how I deal with design indecision. I kind of go with, so there's a lot of aspects to any build, and you kind of got to just start somewhere. So I like to start with what I know. So let me grab, would you put up here?
Yeah.
So here, oh yeah, I can't look. Here is, I'm going to bring all this stuff closer. How's that look?
Boy, I don't know.
Here is Panic Attack. This is literally like a very, very, very early prototype of Panic Attack. So what I guess I'm trying to get across here is I know roughly that I'm going to have a 1 amp hour battery. I know roughly that I'm going to have like these 12 amp brushless ESCs. I know roughly that I'm going to have these motors and these gearboxes. So at least getting this put together gives me a starting point, and I can put all these weights into a spreadsheet and just be like, okay, how much do I have left? The other thing I do is start with the the proportions or the percentage of weight. So I know the weapon is going to be, you know, roughly a pound, maybe like 0.8 pounds, something like that. So you can kind of start putting in unknowns, and then it's just kind of like whack-a-mole. You know, you figure one thing out and then move on to something else, and then this thing changes a little bit. So like the weapon right now is 0.8 pounds. Once I do a little bit more with the chassis, I might find that it needs to be like 0.7 pounds, but then, ooh, I free up weight somewhere else, so then it's 0.9, and you just kind of keep iterating things until the design looks cohesive. And in terms of writer's block, just try a bunch of stuff. I always go through the robots book, and I just flip through and I look at robot designs. I'm like, oh, that'd be cool, that'd be cool. And yeah, just kind of go through and try a bunch of different things out.
Cool.
Yeah.
Any designs for your heavy yet?
Oh, so someone asked if I have any designs for my heavy, and I think at this point right now, the thought is to scale crippling depression up to 250 pounds. It should scale quite well, and a lot of the issues with limited reach and stuff like that should be fixed scaling it up, because, you know, right now it has, basically I have to do a reduction in the belt drive, and that's what keeps the weapon from getting further out. With the heavy, I'd probably need to do either a 1-to-1 or maybe an increase, so the pulleys actually work out better, so I get more reach out of it. So yeah, crippling depression as a heavy, I think, is the thought right now.
What will the weapon be for panic attack?
What will the weapon be for panic attack? So I've talked about this a little bit here and there on Facebook and other places. This is a big version of panic attack. It's just a piece of, this is my scrap laser board that I had. And panic attack is going to be a very low, very flat overhead bar spinner. So the idea that I'm looking to do is do like 1-inch wheels. I think there's like 1 7/8. So do 1-inch wheels, everything extremely flat, maybe the whole body like only 1 inch tall, and then a 12 or 14-inch diameter blade on top of that. So that's kind of the idea right now, is just a big, beefy overhead bar spinner.
Yeah, that was from Kevin Colgan. Victor Garcia asks, any advice on getting the left and right motors to go at the same time? Left is turning before the right.
Yeah, so I'm going to assume a couple things here. Who is that?
This is Victor Garcia.
Victor. So Victor's talking about, you know, kind of driving forward and stuff like that. It's a problem with, if you have lower power, I'm assuming you're talking about an insect class. If you have 2 motors and only 2-wheel drive, you're probably going to run into that issue. The motors are just kind of, you know, not always perfectly matched, and your ESCs on ours perfectly matched. The first thing I would try is calibrate your ESCs. If you're using a tiny ESC, you just have to plug in that little jumper, turn them on, go to full, go to low, go to full, go to low, things like that. You can look at the procedures on how to do that. Definitely calibrate and tune the ESC as step 1. If that's not working, try swapping out some of your motors, like if you're using the N20s or Silver Sparks or whatever it is, swap out the motors and try and find some that match a little bit better. If that's not working, you probably have uneven weight distribution or some other issues with, you know, one wheel hitting better than the other. A good example of this is if I put this on the ground, it drives perfect, drives straight. If I add a little weight right here, it will only drive in a circle. Weight distribution is pretty important, so something to keep in mind.
Just a shout out to Pierce, who is joining us from Australia, and it's 2 a.m. there, and he has to get up to work at 8. So.
Screw your job. That's awesome. Thanks for joining.
I know.
And can you guys hear her if I'm standing right next to her? Let me know.
Let's see. Gabriel asked, do you have a 3D printer? And actually,
do I have a 3D printer? Yes, I do. Let me spin the camera around here. Let me know when it looks good.
Okay.
How does that look?
It looks good.
So yeah, here's my 2 3D printers right now. I've got a CR10, which I'm not really using right now at the moment. I'm probably going to sell this and get rid of it. And I've just recently upgraded to this obscenely large. This is a Formbot Raptor, and this thing can do like 16 by 16 by 21 inches, or was it 400 by 400 by 500, something like that. This thing's pretty cool, and this is printing exclusively Nylon X right now. Where'd that part go? So here is one of the new wheel cups for crippling depression. Let me see if I can get this nicely on camera.
Lag, lag, lag. Lag, lag, lag. Okay, it looks like a black box.
It looks like a black box. This is all Nylon X, which is carbon fiber impregnated nylon, and actually prints pretty nicely. Can't really get that much better than that. So all the new pieces for crippling depression, all like the radio supports, the motor supports, all of that stuff is all going to be this Nylon X in the new version.
Do you want to show a sample of how strong that is, like with the little thin layers?
Oh, yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah, so this this is like the closest thing I have to showing the strength of it. This piece is a little over 2 grams. So this guy is a little over 2 grams, and the layers actually go this way. So trying to break it across the layers,
that's legit.
there's no way I can break this by hand. I mean, it's not even bending or bowing at all. So yeah, a little 2 gram piece, and that's against the layers. There's no way to break this. So I'm liking this over PLA for right now, because all my PLA, like my cups here, this really won't break. You can bend it quite a bit.
And the last one's broke almost every fight.
Yeah, almost every fight I had the PLAs break. They didn't break in a meaningful way. They just kind of snapped a little bit, but this will be a lot nicer. So yeah, Nylon X seems pretty cool so far.
Yeah. Let's see. Pierce asks, have you looked into using something like the O drive in combat robotics?
Oh.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, Pierce was asking about using the O drive. The O drive is a open source motor driver. I want to say it's like a brushless or something like that. I did look pretty heavily into that. One of my favorite sayings is, what problem are you trying to solve? And I've had absolutely no issue using brushless drive from Hobby King, reflashing them with Simon K. That has worked perfectly fine for me. This little guy zips around really nicely, and it's just using the Afro 20 amps with Simon K. I haven't used the O drive because maybe I don't know what I'm missing, but I don't really have any problems with drive, so I just haven't looked into it.
Okay. Layla asks, what controller are you using for that robot?
Yeah, so...
Layla?
Yeah, Layla. Well, then she comes back in for kind of...
Oh, mixing on the transmitter?
Yeah, so I'm using the Tyrannus QX7, which is somewhere around here.
It is on the other side of the screen.
Oh, nice. So yeah, I'm using the Tyrannus radio, the QX7. I really like this radio. It is by far the most favoritist radio I've used. In terms of mixing, I'm doing a few different things. Let me see if I can...
I have crippling depression.
Let me see if I can turn this on and show you a little bit of the mixing. So you're going to tell me if this looks good.
Okay, give me a sec. Waiting out the lag.
Let me do something cool.
That actually looks pretty okay.
Okay. So here's crippling depression. So you'll notice up here, I've got invert, turn, and ultimate speed. So if I hit the invert, you can see, I think somewhere down here. Let's go to a different page. It's somewhere on here. Yeah, this shows invert mode, and then I also have my 3 different speeds. And let's see here. So here's what my mixes look like. 60% throttle, which is reluctant or relying on this one. I've got 30% for my turn standard, and then I think somewhere in here my switches. Okay, this is going to be a much bigger question here. Oh, you know what? Crippling 2, I think that's the one. Yeah, so this is one has normal, invert, and then I have my different speeds. So if I go into my mixing, yeah, you can see that all of these are dependent on my switches. And this takes a while to set up, but you kind of figured out how to do it. So depending on where the switch is, like if you look over here, I can get 40 or 60 or 80% full throttle. And then if we go down here, I've got 30, 55, or 80 in terms of turning. So that's kind of how I have my radio set up, is I have an invert command which inverts the drive, so I can go either forward or backwards or upside down or right side up. And then I have multiple flight, those are flight modes. And then I have the other speed and turning, which is the max top speed of the drive and then the max turning of the drive, set up as separate switches.
I'm not sure if this question makes sense to you. Akshay asks, ESC not flashing with KK multicopter. I don't know what that means, but...
Yeah, Akshay is having problems flashing with multicopter. There's a lot of problems that you can run into. The very first thing is making sure you have all the drivers. It will not tell you if you don't have all the drivers. So look back at my tutorial video on my channel, download all the drivers for the programmer that you have, go into Device Manager and make sure that program is showing up. That's step one. Make sure you have the port selected, either you have USB or the actual port selected. Make sure the programmer is compatible with your ESC. Then, once all that is done, make sure you have the right hex file selected, make sure you have the right firmware selected, and then make sure you have your pinout correct, and all that is, good, and you're actually programming to the right pins. And then sometimes you have to click the button twice to compile and then load on there. Sometimes it fails the first time and you have to do it again. So there's a lot of little things down the chain.
Kevin's talking about you scaling up crippling depression and says that when you scale it up, the weapon force will decrease exponentially. Do you want to say anything about how you plan for your force of impact or anything?
Force of impact?
You know how you calculate the length of the weapon and all that stuff?
Yeah, so Kevin was asking that?
Well, just bringing it up.
Yeah, so Kevin was talking about, scaling up and, weapon energy decreasing. Yeah, that's definitely a thing. I've been calculating a lot of weapon stuff for Panic Attack right now, the little 3-pounder guy. And yeah, you're totally right. The power to weight ratios kind of change, things like that. With crippling depression, when it scales up, the thing that I'm most concerned about is getting the largest or the longest weapon possible. Crippling depression is limited to only a 10-inch diameter weapon. If that went up to a 12 or 14 or a 16-inch long weapon, the kinetic energy goes way up just because of the moment of inertia. You have more weight further out. So I haven't really done it yet with the scaling with crippling depression, but I think like 150 joules per pound is kind of like the minimum that you want to see. And I think crippling depression, so crippling depression should be 4,500 joules. It's like 6,500 joules, so that's okay. And scaling it up, yeah, I would hope that that would be proportionate with whatever 250 times 150 is. But yeah, you're totally right. In set classes, the power to weight ratio is just so much higher. So when you scale it up, it just doesn't work the same way. But I'm also not running full tip speed at crippling depression. I think it's like sub 200, so I can go up to 250 miles per hour. And then I can also do a couple little tricks to make that weapon proportionately larger. So yeah, good thoughts.
Yellow Fox Gaming is talking about maybe in the future making a full tutorial on a BattleBot. I'm not sure if they mean on somebody else's bot, going through and doing kind of a guest thing, or when you make a BattleBot. I'm not sure what they're getting at.
Nice.
But you'll probably be doing tutorials all along the way and videos.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's see.
So yeah, I definitely do a tutorial. Or at least, yeah, like kind of a going along. I'm going to do something a little different with Panic Attack. I'm going to do kind of like, I didn't tell you yet, but I was going to do like little diary videos.
Oh yeah.
Just like a quick, 5-minute, like here it is in its current configuration, here's what I did, just kind of showing you the steps along the way. Maybe explaining less, but just kind of showing the process more.
Yogan is asking, have you tried polycarbonate filament?
Oh.
Saying that it's ridiculously strong.
Yeah, I haven't tried
Yogan?
Yeah, sure. Grace, last name Grace. Yeah, I haven't played with polycarbonate a lot. I've heard good things about it. The reason I'm going with the Nylon X is because it is actually pretty flexible, and I had another piece out here that was really thin, and it will never really break, which is nice. Polycarbonate, from my understanding, can kind of delaminate and break a little bit easier. This stuff kind of holds together, and there's really there's no cracking or breaking. It just kind of goes back to its normal shape. But yeah, polycarbonate is on my list to play with for sure.
Cool. Gabriel asked, do you recommend the CR10 3D printer as a good first 3D printer?
Yeah. I think the CR10, Gabriel was asking, let me know if you can hear her.
Yeah, they said they can.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think the CR10S might be a very good 3D printer. I don't know if you can get just the standard CR10 anymore, but I'm usually not a fan of like entry-level or cheap tools, but the CR10 for under $500 or whatever it is now is a very good printer with a very good build volume. I've had, obviously I've messed with the Stratasys, I've had my Lulzbot, I've had a few others. The CR10 was actually probably one of my most reliable printers just for printing out PLA and it coming out the way you expected. So yeah, I'd highly recommend the CR10 as a beginner printer.
Zach says the last Q&A you mentioned wanting to use more composites like carbon fiber, where you think you just flat plates on crippling depression or something with more complex curvature.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can show off your plates.
Yeah, that's a good question. I am planning on just using more materials, but I like to kind of dip my toe into things first. So crippling depression. Is getting all carbon fiber skins. So these are I think this is like 3 millimeters thick carbon fiber. So this is the material that I have for the top and bottom of crippling depression. Now, spoiler alert, hopefully no one that's competing at ABC or Motorama is watching this video, but this will make crippling depression pretty susceptible to overhead attacks. It's going to be a lot less armor, a lot less good at being armor than the titanium I was using before, but the titanium was extremely expensive. It almost always got damaged because it's metal, and it's just really expensive to replace every single time, and it still got damaged. So for this version of crippling depression, I'm just not going to let anyone hit me on top. How about that? But yeah, I'm playing around with the sheet stuff, and then I'll eventually start doing, my own layups and stuff. And really doing the nylon carbon fiber print stuff is kind of that first step into just kind of understanding how the materials behave, really.
Void is asking, what is Nylon X? It was kind of answered in chat, but I didn't know if you wanted to kind of bring it up what it is.
Yeah, Nylon X is from Matter Hackers, really good site for filament if you want to look at different exotic filaments. It is a nylon, and a lot of the downsides to nylon are it shrinks a lot when you print it. It needs to be printed really hot. There's a lot of kind of trade-offs with nylon, and then it's impregnated with carbon fiber, and so that kind of helps stabilize that out a little bit. So it's kind of less. It just has different properties. It has a little bit of properties both on the finish quality is really nice. It's relatively inexpensive. It's expensive for filament standards, but it's not that expensive. And it's pretty close to like Markforged stuff. So if you're ever familiar with getting stuff printed by a Markforged printer, it's similar. Not the same thing, but similar.
Tyler Cook is asking, how much did the materials cost for crippling depression?
Oh, that's a good question. Which version? Yeah, crippling depression, I'd say materials were probably about $1,500 altogether. The majority of that cost, like the gearboxes are $75 a pop, and I have 3 of them, so that's a couple $100. And then you have The motor's at like 50 bucks a pop, you know, roughly speaking, and I have like 6 to 8 weapon motors, so those add up. And then you have the actual chassis, then you have the batteries. The batteries are like $80 a pop, and I have 2 of those. The ESCs are about like 50. I think they're actually closer to 100 bucks a piece for the weapon and like $50 a piece for the others, and I have, you know, multiples of those. So I think that's kind of where most of the cost comes from, is actually just the electronics. The Waiachi switch is about 100 bucks. So all that kind of adds up. I don't have that much in terms of raw materials. The weapons alone, yeah, my first weapon was maybe about 500 altogether. If you factor in the material, the water jet, and then the heat treating, it was like 150 shipped for the material, then about 125 for the heat treating, and then somewhere like around 50 to 100, I forget, for the water jet. So 500 is a high estimate, but yeah, all those things kind of add up. But the weapon and the electronics are where most of the cost lives.
Looks like Warwick just joined us and asked about any reveals on the Beetle, so you kind of went into it a little bit.
Yeah, I went into it a little bit, but I'll kind of go over it again. This is the basics of the Beetle right now. It's not going to look anything close to this, but I'm testing out the drive as I always do. It's going to be 22mm planetaries from Servo City. I've got these little itty bitty tiny, I think 22mm brushless motors. I'm going to be using 1-inch, I think FingerTech wheels. I might go back to the foam FingerTechs. 1 amp hour battery, blah, 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 blah. But this is going to be an overhead bar spinner. So I'm shooting for about 1 inch tall on the body, and then a 12 or 14 inch bar over top of it. That is S7. So yeah, that's kind of the basics of it.
Nicolas de Castro says hello. Do you think it's a good idea to use low kV motors, like an electric skateboard motor, without reduction box for locomotion?
Yeah, this is a tough question. So this is 100% my opinion. So put up a little spoiler tag right here, Robert's opinion. My opinion is that you should be using higher kV motors with a gear train on them. And here's why. The biggest downside of a brushless motor versus a brushed motor is a brushed motor, when you apply power to it, it's going to try and move regardless, and you know, it just has that low end torque. With a brushless motor, it has to kind of find that phase, and for the firmware to work, like the Simon K firmware to actually function, the motor actually needs to start turning. You actually need to get some inductance, and that's how you figure out where you are, and then you can start spinning. If you have a really low kV motor, you're going to have a problem actually starting to spin on the get-go. So what I like doing is using a high kV motor or a higher kV motor and gearing it down, so that like on this, if I'm holding the wheel, I can move this almost 2 full turns before I'm really feeling much movement on here. So you can actually get the inertia of the motor spinning, and then it can kind of bring you forward. But if this was like, let's say a 1-to-1 on that motor, me clamping it, it would be really hard for it to find those phases. So that's my personal opinion. There are losses in the gearbox though, so that's kind of the downside. But I like running a higher kV motor so it can get that inertia and get that spin up going before you actually really start moving.
Good question from Warwick. What hot end did you end up going with to use Nylon X?
Yeah, so Warwick is asking hot end, and that's, yeah, he's a guy. He's a guy.
What?
Hello, Warwick. For the hot end for the FormBot, I actually ended up using a 0.4mm hardened nozzle, E3D hardened nozzle. I'm using the standard hot end right now. I might end up going to the Volcano, but I think my issues were something else. I was having some issues with this. There was something else. I also have a 0.8mm hardened nozzle on that same hot end, but it is an all metal hot end. I don't have any PFTE tube in there. So all metal with both a 0.4mm and a 0.8 hardened. The 0.4 is looking pretty good. I'm going to try the 0.8 a lot later, but 0.4 is pretty good right now.
Eogan has a comment about the polycarb
Mhm,
filament,
yeah.
saying that he didn't have a problem with delamination, but you might need an enclosure to keep it around 300C.
Okay, yeah, I'm printing Nylon X at 265, and I'm pretty happy with 265. I had to add one of those like silicone boots to the heater block. That helped tremendously. And I would probably go with a Volcano if I was going to be printing at 300, but good to know, yeah, the polycarbonate needs to be printed really, really hot.
Eric Mueller asked, do you have any suggestions for fixturing and milling titanium sheet on a Tormach?
Titanium sheet, that's a tough one. Titanium is just kind of a pain. There's a couple different ways to do it. Come here, buddy.
Hey, honey.
Come here. There's a couple different ways to do titanium sheet. You could definitely try double stick tape or like carpet tape. Titanium doesn't really want to bend or flex a whole lot, depending on how thin you're going here, right? If you're going really thin, like armor plates or something, carpet tape. Go to Home Depot, go to Lowe's, get carpet tape, put it down. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to use coolant, so that's tricky. The other thing that you could do is just drill a hole pattern in it, bolt that down to a sacrificial plate, and then do your cutting. That could be another way to do it, but it depends on how thin you're going. There's also a vacuum plate. You could also do a vacuum plate on there too. So a couple options.
Warwick is asking if you did any comparisons with different carbon fiber filaments, talking about Carbon X, Nylon X, and if that might be a video in the future.
I actually didn't do any comparisons between materials. I spent about 6 months doing a lot of looking. I searched all over the Facebook group for combat robots. I did all of Tom Salamander's videos. However you say his last name, we call him Tom Salamander. I looked at all his videos on the strengths. I've talked with a lot of people. I've done seminars with Mark Forge. I've talked with them many times. I just basically kind of did my own like theoretical on paper research and then just printed Nylon X, and then I'm going to test this out in combat, and if I have any issues I'll go further than there. But a lot of people have already kind of done this work. Like I know the Talaman Nylon 951 or something like that. It's supposed to be pretty cool too. I just ended up with this because of the properties of it. I didn't want a lot of warping. Things like this tend to warp, you know, so I like the dimensional accuracy of this and all the theoretical on paper of this, but I didn't do any comparisons personally because 3D printing sucks and it takes forever.
You might mention on the carbon fiber filament, it has to be really dry. They recommend baking it because it's hydrophilic.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
Yeah, this stuff is really problematic because it has to be super, super, super dry. So that's a big problem. But thankfully out here in Colorado, it is so dry. I don't really have to worry about that much, which is good. But I know Luke was having issues with this stuff sticking to his bed, and the Formbot thankfully has an AC bed heater, and I was printing at like 60, 65 on the bed with a polypropylene sheet with PVA glue on top of that, and then I was also just smashing that filament right down into the bed, and that actually helped. I got a tiny bit of warping just on this edge, but you could not see this on camera.
Alrighty. Hi, Zephyr. Tyler asked, what inspired you to build combat robots?
Oh, what inspired me to build combat robots? I worked with Casey Coons, who built Electric Lawn Gnome Supremacy. He also built Doomba, which was later sold to Bots FC, and of Poison Arrow fame as well. So I worked with Casey, and he brought in Electric Lawn Gnome Supremacy one day, and he showed it to me. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool, and I saw it. And then he was getting ready for Robo Games one year, and we brought it down in the mech shop, and he did like a 30% power spin up on the drum. Unprotected in an open room, Casey. And hearing that thing in a small, like 10 foot by 12 foot room, enclosed, spinning up to 30%, yeah, I went home and started doing some designs, and that's what I ended up doing Sergeant Cuddles on, because I wanted a drum like his drum. So that's what kind of got me started, is seeing his 5 feet away, unprotected, spinning up to 30%. Yeah. If you dig enough on my channel, you can actually find that video.
Kevin is saying that high kV motors are good for vertical bar spinners. He used a 1700 kV brushless in-runner to spin his weapon on his 15-pound bot.
Okay, nice.
Oops. Hashtag pupper. Zephyr. Good boy.
Come here. They can't see you.
See. Team Screw Up is trying to troll by talking about Terror Turtle again.
Can we block people?
I don't know. Laylath is asking about carbon fiber for Antweight robots.
Yeah, if I had to go back in time and redo Sergeant Cuddles, I probably would do some kind of carbon fiber 3D printed thing. So you talking about filament or carbon fiber in general?
It was right here, just carbon fiber for.
Yeah, I think carbon fiber is a really good material for ants. It's not used a lot in the bigger weight classes, mostly because it chips and it loses structural integrity, and if it's, what's that word? If it gets damaged, then structural integrity just goes completely away. It either works or it doesn't work. For ants, it's actually a little bit better proposition. So yeah, I think for ants and beetles, I think people should be looking at these 3D printed filaments. I think carbon fiber is a good one. Garolite is another good material. The materials that you don't see much in the heavier classes have a good place in the small ones. So yeah, I would definitely do the 3D printed thing. I mean, you guys can't feel this, but this is just stupid light. This is like 30% lighter than a PLA, and I would take this any day of the week. So I think, yeah, those carbon fibers and those really cool exotic materials have a good place in ants and beetles.
Yogan points out that adding a raft to your print helps avoid warping.
Yeah, the only reason I don't like doing rafts is because it takes longer, which is marginally more time, and I also don't like the edge that it leaves. I really like, I mean, this is stupid, but I really like just the clean edge that's left without a raft. I know you can just slice it off, but what I like trying to do is I like trying to dial the printer in to where I don't need it. And then if I end up needing a raft, I'll probably print it, but there is a way to get this done without a raft, and if your printer is dialed in enough, I like trying to just dial it in and make it more frustrating on myself. It's true.
It is. Chris Mikovsky is writing from Boulder. You mentioned shock mounting in a recent Facebook post. What are you doing for shock mounting on your Beetle?
Yeah, so this is going to be really, really hard to explain, but let me try. So I'm using, let me grab the motor. You can like stare at the camera, she might dance or something.
Wait, what?
I don't know. Okay.
What'd you say?
I said you might dance.
Oh, no, I'm not going to.
So I'm using one of these motors. This is like an ACK, something like that. It's just a nice little pancake motor, 40 millimeter pancake motor. These things can theoretically deliver like 800 watts, theoretically. So what I'm going to be doing is this is going to be mounted to a plate, okay? Then there's going to be a hat over top of it that matches in with this pattern on the top. So there'll be a hat on top of that. And then I'm going to have a flanged bearing that actually kind of hooks into a groove on that hat. And then that whole thing is going to be sandwiched down inside the frame against like UHMW or some kind of cushion. So think of it that this whole thing is going to be in kind of its own pod that's sandwiched together inside the chassis. So the chassis has a recess on top, recess on bottom, and then the whole thing kind of gets sandwiched and it's kind of shock mounted through that mount. It's complicated. I'll probably have to draw it up and show you that later. But yeah, that's kind of how I'm going to shock mount this. I'm going to do direct drive, but I'm not relying on really the shaft or any of the bearings to hold it in place. It's more the frame or the structure that's doing that. So we'll see how that works out.
Warwick says, oh no, that's the kamikaze motor. No.
Yeah, this is this, and I have the red one over there. These are the weapons I was using for kamikaze. And interestingly enough, if everything works out right, I mean, I'm probably going to be running a 60 amp ESC on this. Just, I don't want that to be an issue. I'm going to flash Simon K to the 60 amp ESC, and yeah, we'll see how that works out, but I'm going to be pushing probably 20 to 30% higher kinetic energy than what kamikaze had, but hopefully it'll actually spin up this time.
All right, Team Scrub asks, what's your opinion on steel for wedges? I've been using it for ferry weights, helped them beat a lot of legendary ants in the UK. Do you think it's okay for not having titanium?
Yeah, I think steel's fine. Titanium is nice because it springs, so it's very springy, so it's hard to deform, but steel is still steel. Steel is very hard. It's just, if you have steel and titanium, titanium's going to be better in almost every way, but its cons are going to be the cost and the cost and the cost.
Yeah.
It's really just a lot more expensive and it's harder to fabricate with. Steel is just going to, I guess the better way to say it is titanium is more optimized, if that makes sense. It's lighter, but you're paying for it in terms of cost. So yeah, steel is perfectly fine. I don't think functionally they're that different. You're just giving up some weight by not using titanium. That's really it. So yeah, perfectly fine.
Warwick is talking about traction issues, especially with the cuddly one. And the Sunrise are people making their own wheels. Have you thought about doing custom wheels?
Yeah, so custom wheels. I have thought about doing it. I'm not going to do it anytime real soon. Sergeant Cuddles was an interesting robot. It was, you know, like, let's all remind ourselves, it was my very first combat robot ever, so I learned a lot of things over time. And Cuddles couldn't drive well because I don't really think it was because of the wheels, it's just the geometry. The drum on the front was very heavy. The overall weight of the weapon motor and that drum or the beater bar was like 35% of the weight. So you're putting a ton of weight up front. No matter how close you get those wheels to the beater bar, the balance isn't right. And unfortunately, with any of these two-wheeled robots, your balance just is never really going to be that great. And that was the issue with Sergeant Cuddles. So I'm not really looking at the wheels, I'm looking more at the design implementation. So even though this is only two wheels, Panic Attack will actually be either four-wheel motor drive or two motors and a belt system for the four-wheel. So it will be four-wheel drive, and I'm paying very close attention to where the wheels go. That's why this exists now, is I'm going to make sure that the wheel arrangement works out with the weight on it and then go with where the weapon should end up. But yeah, I'm paying a lot more attention to the drive because of that. You can compete without a weapon. If your weapon dies, you can still go, but if your drive dies, you're done.
True that.
True that.
Team Scrub says that they built a nanoweight and then asked why they did it. Anyone know what it's like to do something, have no idea why they did it?
Yep.
Do you have any projects like that?
Kamikaze. I mean, Kamikaze is that. What a lot of people don't know, or I keep forgetting, is that 2 weeks before ABC, Casey had a Facebook post and he's like, hey guys, we don't have any Beetles, or we only have like 3 Beetles, we need more Beetles. And so I took my spare parts from Sergeant Cuddles, 3D printed a chassis, and then just bought a hunk of 4140 and just made a weapon out of it. It was literally like a weekend or two before the competition, I made Kamikaze to fill out the Beetles. And you know, looking back at it, it's a 2-pound hunk of 4140 that I'm just spinning around. Like, yeah, it's not a great robot, and I'm not really 100% sure why I made it, but it's cool.
Oh, while we're talking about it, whatever happened to the Kamikaze weapon?
I still have it. I want to do like a shadow box for all this stuff. I just kind of need the time to do it, but the weapon is still right here in all of its glory. So yeah, it still exists. It's actually a little bent up, and I'm not sure how that worked, but there's a big gap right here, and so it's not perfectly flat anymore. It kind of rises up on one edge. I'm not really sure how that happened, because this is like ½ inch thick or something. It's still around. The problem with this weapon is it's not really very optimized. I could drill holes right here and take out, you know, 2 ounces worth of weight, and it would still have the exact same kinetic energy. So it's just not a very optimized weapon, so it's just going to be for looking.
Joshua is making the case for good steel being stronger and harder than titanium, just lower strength to weight, and if you have the weight, it's always preferred. Okay,
yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I tend to do titanium also. You know, that whole thing of if you have the weight, that's a big one. What I tend to do is I kind of pick apart every single little thing. So when I go through a design, I have a spreadsheet of every single screw, every shim, every keyway. I have everything. I have like a percentage of the overall weight. And for me, it's like a business. You know, is this person pulling their weight? So it's like, you know, is this little pinion gear worth a 0.01% of the overall weight? And yeah, so for me, I try and lighten everything as much as possible, and I try and get the most bang for buck. So that's why I'm using titanium a lot. But you're 100% right. You can go better with steel, but I don't know if that extra weight always gets me what I want. So yeah, for me, it's a little bit different, but you're totally right. When in doubt, steel is going to be a good choice.
Yeah. I think we're caught up.
Yay!
I don't know if you want to
drive this thing around.
yeah, drive that thing around in the box.
Ooh, you guys want to see this drive around? Let me see if my cord will reach over to my test box. Do make everyone sick. I don't know if it's going to be long enough.
Maybe. If you tilt it down, you should be able to see.
Could also yeah, let me know how that looks.
You can stand to see more. Can you point down anymore?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it doesn't point down a whole lot. Yeah, this thing just, it doesn't go down much.
Move it back maybe a little bit. You might be able to see a little more. Waiting.
If not, you can just drive around.
It's good. Stay on the side by the garage door.
Okay. So yeah, let's take a look at what panic attack looks like now. A couple things here to note. This is not going to be two-wheel drive. It's going to be four-wheel drive. And literally, I'm just kind of testing out the brushless drive here. That's really all this is for. So this is Afro 20 amp ESCs, 22 millimeter planetaries, and an SK3 22 millimeters something or others.
I have crippling depression. Switch warning.
Let's see here.
Switch warning.
There it is.
It's so quiet.
Yay, test box. Oh, and these are my old settings too. So, yeah, so it's pretty good. It needs a little bit of work with the programming. The biggest issue I have with this right now is, well, it's two-wheel drive and not four-wheel drive, and there's too much coasting. Because of the high kV of these motors, I think they're like 2200, I'm getting a lot of coasting, so I need to change some of the brake settings. Let's see, let's turn the turning speed down. So I've got my turning set to a 20% mix, and that is much nicer. And I think my final RPM here is like 750. So it's a little bit slower than I would like. I might go a little bit faster, but overall I'm pretty happy with the performance of the gearbox and the motors. And I've tried putting a little extra weight on here, and it works just fine. Yeah, that's the very, very early start of Panic Attack.
Cool beans.
And for everyone too, I will be doing a tutorial video on the Beetle brushless drive. It's really, really easy if you get the right components. It took me maybe like, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes to get everything set up for the brushless drive, taking the pinions off, putting it on there. If you have an arbor press, it takes like 15 minutes to pop those together if you have all the right parts. So I'll do some kind of video, maybe next weekend I'll get that together. So.
Warwick asks, any new tools in the shop that you're excited about or planning on purchasing?
Yeah, I always have new tools. I'm trying to think what's new since just like last live stream.
I think the 3D printer is probably the newest.
Yeah, the 3D printer's newest. So if anyone didn't see that, so I've got the Formbot over here, which is big. So here we go. Banana for scale. Yeah, the Formbot is a big beast. So there you can see the banana. This is new. Oh, I've got a lot of new crap sitting around.
For your drill press? Then
Yeah, let's see. Just tucked under. So Nova, or Technitool, actually contacted me. You can kind of see it right there. Yeah. So Nova or Technitool contacted me, and they gave me an upgrade to my Voyager drill press. This is a whole new spindle for the thing. This is an ER32 collet, so you can actually put in milling bits in this and actually use it for light machining, which is kind of interesting. So it actually has angular contact bearings with preload, so this can actually be used for milling, which is really neat. And very, very smooth, beefy cylinder. And then also a new table to go with it. I kind of like the original table better, but this is just another option for the table. So I haven't put this together yet, but they're coming out with, I don't think this is a spoiler because they've announced it, but they're coming out with a version of the Voyager. I can't remember what it's called. The Voyager is their woodworking drill press, and they're coming out with a metalworking version of it that has some other cool name, and this is basically the upgrade package. And so I'm just kind of doing some engineering tests for them just to kind of play with it and see what I think. Engineering feedback. I'm just one of their beta testers for this, so that's pretty cool. I have a lot of other tools. Let me know if you want to see more tools.
There was some discussion on how to save weight for screws in your design, and Eric was talking how he downloads the screws from McMaster and then applies the proper material. So I think that's how you do it, right?
Yep. I don't typically download. I use the fastener, the toolbox in SolidWorks, which has all the fasteners in it. And then what I do is I just have the physical screw, weigh it on my little weed scale over here, and then measure that weight, just override the weight into SolidWorks. But yeah, I add in every screw and every shim too, because they add up over time. But yeah, McMaster is good.
Diogen asks, would you ever consider using Omni wheels?
Yes, I would consider using Omni wheels. I have a design that I don't want to share right now because I'm just kind of working it through in my mind. But I do have a design that utilizes Omni wheels kind of in a slightly different way. But I might play with them someday. The problem with Omni wheels is you're never going to get the traction, period. You're just never going to get the traction out of them, so you have to kind of not rely on the traction. You have to rely more on the mobility, and if they ever get like cut or jarred in any way, they don't work the right way. So yeah, but I think I have a couple applications where they could make sense.
Let's see, who was saying this? Team L Productions is asking if we've seen Phantom 2. It's an overhead bar spinner in the Beetle class. I'm trying to Google it.
Phantom 2 Beetleweight, maybe? Do you have a link for that? I'm kind of curious to see.
That did not work.
No, that did not work. Yeah, let me know if you have a link to that. I'm curious to see any and every overhead bar spinner, because I kind of want to see everyone's design. I've looked at a lot of designs, but yeah, I kind of have my own ideas of how I want to do it. But yeah, if you have a link, post a link.
Alright, okay. Let's see. doing brushes for wedge on mutually assured destruction.
Oh, nice.
Oh, excited to see that brushless beetle drive video.
Yeah, I think the brushless beetle drive is going to be big, and I'm even talking with, so some of you may or may not know, but I'm kind of sponsored by Servo City. They're good friends of mine, and I'm trying to get them to carry just the gearbox and the pinion alone, which I know a lot of people would be very, very happy if they could just buy the gearbox with the free pinion, but that's something I've been talking with them about. So once I come out the Beetle video, all you guys have to do is kind of push them a little bit, and hopefully they'll start carrying just that gearbox alone, which will be really cool.
Some folks talking about Circ. I forget which one is that?
Central Illinois Robotic. That's the one that's by where I grew up.
Okay.
It's in Champaign.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yep.
Neat.
Yeah, Circ's coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would, if I wasn't busy, I would go to Circ. I want to go to Circ because it's kind of my own old hometown, close to it. But yeah, just kind of a little too busy.
Do you know Black Lightning Robotics on the Facebook group?
I don't.
Oh, anyway, apparently
Yeah.
that's the bot.
Yeah, let me look at it real quick.
Cool.
Black Lightning?
It Phantom 2 with Black Lightning Robotics.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'll take a look.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I've got it added.
Phantom 2.
Yes. Yeah, I know that. Yeah, I know that one. Mine's going to be a little bit different, but yeah, not that dissimilar from that.
We have a title of a YouTube video. I think we're pretty much up to date on questions. Anything else you want to share on what you're doing with your video scheduling these days, or?
Yeah, I'm kind of caring a little bit less about videos, which is something you may or may not like to hear. I'm trying to get more projects out and maybe document them a little bit less because, sometimes just machining little things, I have to set up the camera and do this. There's just so many more steps with the actual filming of it, and filming everything is it's tough. So I'm going to be probably working on projects a little bit more and doing less videos. Or the nature of my videos is going to be more kind of like a post wrap-up tutorial, or like how to do Beetle Drive, things like that. Yeah, so we'll see how kind of videos go. But yeah, I'm just starting to get a little overwhelmed with every single weekend, spending the 5 or 10 hours to make a video. So we'll see how that goes.
Cool.
Oh, yeah, I like the overhead bar spinners. This is what needs to happen.
Ooh, yeah, that's a rough fight, man.
Oh yeah.
We're watching the video that Warwick posted, yeah. Yeah, so bringing up the issue of invertibility, yeah, that's always a concern.
Yeah, so the overhead bar spinner will not be invertible. I thought of a few different ways of doing it. I thought about putting the dome on top, putting this. I'm just going to be, this is the first, Kamikaze was the first bot that wasn't invertible, but that was something else. This is going to be the first one that I'm really sitting down and designing, like spending a lot of time designing, that I know will not be invertible, and I don't think I'm going to have any mechanisms for it. It's just don't flip it. That's it. But I'm trying to get it as low as possible and as flat and wide as possible, so that flipping it is not a really good proposition. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Mutually assured destruction, it says very excited to see the one where you build a bot with basic tools.
Yeah, I do want to do that one. I was going to do it for ABC, but I want a really cool Beetleweight first. I really liked Sergeant Cuddles. Sergeant Cuddles was cool. Kamikaze, it was cool, but it wasn't fun to go to a competition with, because you had to basically tell the other person, like, give me a minute to spin up. It just wasn't a very fun bot to compete with. So I want a Beetle that, if there's a competition and we're just free for the weekend, I can just fly out with a Beetle and compete and then come back. And so I want a Beetle that's a little bit more robust, a little bit more well-known, and something that can actually compete well. So once I get that out of the way with Panic Attack, yeah, then I might just kind of play around with some different designs and build some cheap stuff.
Cool. Any idea why ABC is only streaming on Saturday and not Sunday? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, because SparkFun are a bunch of idiots. They have no idea how to market anything. They couldn't market their way out of a paper bag.
Shots fired.
Shots fired, yeah. SparkFun just doesn't understand marketing whatsoever, so it's probably like oh, well, it's, you know, $500 a day or $800 for 2 days. Let's save $300. I just don't think they know what they're doing. I don't think they know the community, the great community, and the crowd that's behind this. I don't think they get it. I mean, they were wanting no spectators.
Oh yeah, that's dumb.
They don't understand that they have like the second largest robot competition in the US.
And
They don't understand that.
that. And it's getting more popular.
They don't understand. They have no idea. I mean, so a little fun fact is on the latest ABC, a couple of people at SparkFun that were helping run the event actually emailed Casey and asking if they could change the weight classes around because they were having a hard time building robots in that weight class. So like, can we make it like 3.5 pounds? Because my robot went over 3 pounds. Like, we're gonna change weight classes for combat robots. Yeah, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what this is.
Scott asked, what are your thoughts on using O-drive board with large brushless gimbal disc motor, I know some of these words,
Yeah.
as a locomotion system for a quadruped?
Oh.
Brushless gimbal motor
Boy.
per joint. Oh my goodness, that's
Yeah, so
complicated.
so for you, a gimbal motor looks a lot like this, but they have a very low kV rating. As we all know, kV is kV times volts equals final RPM. So if you run it at 10 volts and it's a 100 kV motor, you'll get 1,000 revolutions per minute out of it. These are usually really, really, really low kV, and they're meant for like small positioning stuff like that, right, for gimbals. I haven't played with those a whole lot, but I have a feeling that you'll have an issue with that startup torque, like I mentioned, because if you've ever felt any of those, like, you know, I mean, 100 kV, that's like a stepper motor. That really, at the end of the day, is like about the positioning of a stepper motor. So I'm worried that getting that first couple steps, you know, those first couple movements will be tricky. However, those things are super, super torquey, usually well made, and they're usually pretty good at responding. So I don't know, I think it'd be cool. I've wanted to play with the gimbal motors. I haven't, but go for it.
Yeah.
I think it could be good. It could be good. It's either going to be really good or it's just not going to work. I don't know.
Zachary Haynes is asking, what advice do you have for someone who is new to ant or Beetleweight competitions? We have some good responses in the comments here, like finishing your bot before the event and practicing with it.
Yeah.
Practice driving. Driving is always the killer for a new bot, I think.
Yeah. I think don't let yourself fall into the trap of making it perfect. Make it usable first. Like, you guys all know that I create some pretty complicated robots and I put a lot of money into them. I mean, that Beetle's going to be an expensive Beetle when it's done. And I mean, you see the first version of Panic Attack. It's a piece of plywood with stuff like hose clamps screwed to it. You need to start there. You need to not over-plan it, over-design it. You just need to figure out how this stuff works. Get a battery that works, get all the drive working, and make sure the thing just can drive around. I don't know, throw stuff at it, drop it from 10 feet, see if it can survive that. Make it more usable. You can make it pretty later. I mean, I think crippling depression is a good example of something that really wasn't pretty in the beginning. I need to make it work, and now I'm making it prettier. So make something functional first and foremost that's going to be reliable, and then worry about all the details later.
There was also a suggestion about going to watch competitions first,
Yes.
which I think is good as well.
I think when you do too much YouTube and you're looking at stuff online, you get kind of an idea of how things are. But I know my parents just kind of recently got into this. If they're watching, hello. But they just kind of recently got into this, and we went to Motorama, and the first couple days they have ants and beetles in the first day, and then you go into the bigger ones. And when they were watching the ants and beetles, they're like, holy shit, you know, these little beetles have a lot of power to them. When you see it in person, you realize you're looking at your little cardboard robot that you thought was fine, and you're like, never mind. You know, you really need to go to the competition and kind of see what it looks like in person. That's going to give you a better idea of how strong you need to engineer these things. Anybody?
Let's see. Yeah. Oh, another good point, make it serviceable.
Yes.
Don't use a ton of weird screws. Try to use standard parts.
Yep.
Make sure you can access things, because yeah, you're going to have to rip it apart after every fight, and it's a pain in the butt sometimes.
Yeah, that's, so Kim's gonna love this one. So one of the things that we do as a couple is we go to Home Depot or Jack's, which is a local hardware store here, and we look for hardware. And she loves it, just adores looking for hardware. One of the reasons why I do that, I can get anything through McMaster, I can get anything through Amazon, but if you can find it at your local hardware store, your design will be better because it's just easier. If you have to get like, you know, an 820 undercut head, you know, 5/16 of an inch long, if you have to get these really weird specific hardware, you might be designing around some weird constraints. So try and do everything as off the shelf as possible, and in the rare case that you need an undercut head or a ultra low profile, then go with it. But definitely try the standard hardware first.
And consider what tools you would have to bring to an event, because if
Yep.
you're flying anywhere, it gets to be a lot of weight real quick.
Yeah, and
I see it.
dog right there. Does that show up on camera?
I don't know.
I probably shouldn't pen like that.
Can barely see him. It looks
So,
so bad.
a good example of this kind of simplicity is I don't always like making custom things, but these are the these are the small weapon pulleys that go on crippling depression. So this is what the weapon motor is directly tied to. And you notice I have these two screws here. Those, or these two holes, those are 632 tapped holes. So what I can do is I can actually put screws into there and use that to pull this out. Little things like that you need to think about. Think about serviceability, because if you have this pulley on a 2,000 watt motor and it gets a little cockeyed, this thing is not going to come out without a good fight. So make sure you think about how stuff not only goes together but also comes apart. So think about the servicing.
Any ideas for a self-righting mechanism for panic attack? Or are we just gonna hope?
You know, I've thought about the self-righting mechanisms for it. I thought about, you know, with the chassis where you have the wheels all the way in the back that are exposed. So, you know, if it lands kind of like that upside down, you could still kind of drive that way. I thought about having the cone on the top. You thought about having the cone on the top once again. I thought about having a little wedge, almost like duck, you know, that could kind of lift up, and that could be a self-righter. I don't want to design any of that crap in there. I want to have it as just, I want to design it to not ever get flipped, because what's going to happen is if it does get flipped, if I don't think about that and I'm like, I'll just have a self-righting mechanism, I'm going to spend a weight on the self-righting mechanism and I'm going to not focus on it not getting flipped. So the idea is I want to design this thing in every way possible so that it's really, really hard to get upside down, and I think that'll make it a better bot. Because inadvertently the self-righting mechanism is going to fail, or I'm going to go up against a wall, or something's going to happen where that won't function, and I'm at the same place again. Very rarely do self-righting mechanisms work really well.
Yep.
So you get at 10 a.m.
Yeah. Joshua was talking more about the gimbal motors, using it with no gearbox for a Beetle drive. I don't know.
Beetle drive, wow.
That sounds.
It's a big. Oh, I guess they do make the smaller ones. Yeah, when I was doing the Beetle for Panic Attack, I'm still not done. You know, Panic Attack's still very much a work in progress. I was considering a direct drive with the gimbals, but I don't know. I also wanted really shallow, so the gimbal motors are typically bigger. But do it, let me know, because I definitely was interested in doing that.
Team-Up Productions asking about the name Panic Attack. I wasn't aware that there was a famous Robot Wars robot that was Panic Attack.
Oh.
Whoa, what if you go into your DSM Robotics concept? Because I don't think we've discussed that here.
Yeah, I don't know how much we discussed it. If anyone knows my team name, I don't really talk about team name much, but it's DSM Robotics, which I have a background in psychology. My degree is actually in psychology. I have a BA in psych with a heavy focus on like clinical and kind of medical stuff. So the DSM-4 now is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Diagnosing Clinical Mental Disorders. And it is kind of the encyclopedia for all mental disorders. And so because of my psych background and everything else, I labeled the team DSM Robotics, and all my new bot names going forward will be based on some kind of disorder in there. So crippling depression, I don't think they really clinically call it crippling depression, but...
Well, we like to make a pun with some sort of like action fight verb along with a malady. So we have crippling depression, panic attack.
Yeah.
We have some others in line.
Don't say
I won't say any.
But yeah, we thought a lot about this, and we have a few names, and panic attack was the obvious choice. You have crippling depression, just and then you have panic attack, which is, you know, not severe, but it's definitely a little bit less severe than crippling depression. So yeah, they're just kind of all plays on mental disorders, which is not as funny as it sounds saying it. But.
Right, yeah. It's not as cute as like food fight robotics.
Exactly.
It's a little heavy.
Yeah, but at the same time, you know, panic attack, crippling depression, they sound fun, but yeah, it comes from my psychology background.
Eric asked, do you have any suggestions for flying with robot lipos and sharp things? Which is actually a really good topic because there's some restrictions for lipos. You have to carry them on your carry-on.
Oh, flying, yeah. So go to Amazon or go to Hobby King. Hi, honey.
Hi, honey.
Go to Amazon or Hobby King and get a lipo bag. It's just literally a little bag that you put your lipos in. Get a lipo bag. Flying, not an issue. I had both of the batteries to crippling depression in my carry-on, right, when I flew, and I had my radio also in that same carry-on. It went through, pulled me aside, touched stuff, and then they opened up the bag and they took the radio out and wanted to see the batteries in the radio, and the lipos they didn't even say anything about. I've never ever had TSA be even remotely interested in lipos. And what I did, just to make it safe, is I printed out the TSA guidelines for lithium batteries, printed that out, and just taped it around the batteries just in case. But I've never had an issue with them ever even looking at a lipo battery, so they don't seem to care. But yeah, you fly with it on your carry-on, put it in the lipo bag, you're golden.
Yeah, and just check all the regulations because there's, you know, a certain amount that you're allowed to have.
Yeah, there's a calculator online that's how much lithium is too much lithium, and basically it's a watt-hour rating, and my 3,000 milliamp hour, 3 amp hour batteries for crippling depression were like half of that limit. So if you're traveling with a middleweight or a heavy, your batteries might be an issue, but any of the smaller ones, it's not even close to the limit. I got both dogs out here.
Yeah, and on that note, like I had my bag searched when I had large rocks in them, so it's not as difficult as it seems like it should be.
The batteries will not be the thing that's going to be the issue. It's going to be some other random like wiring harness that looks like a bomb. But yeah, the battery's not an issue.
All right, let's see.
But be safe and get a lipo bag.
Yeah. I don't know what MAD is. I'm not MAD.
Yeah, MAD, what's that?
Trying to find. Oh, mutually assured destruction. Yeah.
Oh,
sorry. Staying organized with all the small parts. Yeah, you have extensive organization structures for competitions, which is important.
Yeah, I'm a very organized person. I start. This is going to sound so terrible. I start every robot design in Google Sheets. I literally start every design as a spreadsheet. I take drive system, weapon system, chassis and structure, and electronics, and I know generally speaking from just kind of building a few robots what those percentages will be. And so I'm like, okay, what's a good weight for a weapon motor? I just take one of my other robots and say, oh, that was 10% of the overall weight or whatever it is, pop that down, and then it gives me a good idea of what all the weights are, and then I go on Hobby King, I'm like, okay, what does 90 grams get me in a motor? Oh, this motor is 90 grams, okay, what wattage is that? Okay, if that's running for 0.05 hours, which is 3 minutes, what kind of current am I going to discharge? So then I look at batteries, and everything just kind of plays off of itself, but I start all my designing as a spreadsheet. And yeah, it helps me keep organized, and when I'm doing that, I also put down like every screw, every fastener, so if I'm like using multiple sizes of a single 832 screw, let's say, I'll consolidate it down to one 832 screw that might be a little bit longer than I need in some places, but then I only have one, and I'll just get a little box of 50 of them and just be done. So yeah, kind of staying organized with your parts is very critical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people are saying tackle boxes, yeah, which is perfect, because if you have like this big metal toolbox, yeah, no, you can't really fly with that.
I actually do something interesting.
Oh, your bags
Yeah.
of bags.
I do bags. So this is spares for the weapon. You can see all the actual drive shafts, all the spare bearings. This one is just kind of spares in general. It's just miscellaneous hardware. Pretty much everything here will fit on crippling depression, but isn't per se used. And then what I'll do is I will actually make up little baggies, little Ziploc baggies, for, like, let's say the armor covers. So the first things that you service to pull in and out the battery, I'll do 2 whole sets of all the extra screws in a baggie, boom. So if you're taking the armor off and you misplace that one screw, you just go to the armor baggie and there's plenty of extras in there. All the weapon stuff has its own baggie, all the drive stuff has its own baggie, so all my spare pinions, all my spare drive motors, all of those are in a baggie. So I just put everything in a baggie because a tackle box I'm not good with, I'll just intermingle it, but if I just keep everything in a baggie, that's nice and simple. So each baggie kind of has its own parts of the robot, yeah.
Yeah, and that's helpful for your pit crew, if you have one. Let's see.
Oh, and I also pre-wire all the electronics. So if I do a Beetle or an Antweight, I'll actually do the skeletonized version of the wiring. So it'll be the switch, wired into ESCs, wired into everything. And then usually I design my robots so that whole thing can just lift out. And if I have a problem with a robot, what I'll do is literally, there's 2 screws that hold the switch in place and everything's free floating. Take those 2 screws out, take the whole wiring harness out, put the whole new wiring harness in, and boom, go. And all the ESCs and everything's already pre-wired, so I don't have to unwire everything. So in the rare case I do have an ESC fail, I just take out the whole wiring, put it back in, and then fix the other one outside the robot, and then basically I'm just swapping the whole wiring harnesses. And I think I have...
Do you have a spare?
I think I have a spare. And I sold crippling depression, but yeah, like this is the whole wiring harness aside from the weapon motor ESC for Kamikaze. So you have the battery coming in here, it's already pre-wired into the jumpers, and this is where the drive or the weapon ESC would go right there. And then I have the 2 tiny ESCs. So all of this is 100% wired up. You plug in the radio and it's good to go. So I do these kind of harnesses to where all the lengths are right to make servicing really quick and easy.
So TML Productions says that Phantom 2 can drive upside down, which looking at that picture, I have a hard time believing.
Oh, because it kind of cocks up on the side and drives with the back wheels.
Oh,
yeah. I once again, I thought about doing that, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
So apparently Panic Attack is a Beetle already, and there was a toy out, so we might need to modify our name.
There's a toy?
On maybe the Robot Wars version or something. So, yeah, we might look into a modification or something.
Schizophrenic.
Schizophrenic is good.
Oh, I like Panic Attack.
Hi, David of Team Small.
Hi, David!
We did kind of go over it. We are going to be 4-wheel drive on the Beetle. And you're going brushless, right? Or, I mean, like 2-wheel with the belts.
It's going to have 4 wheels. I'm not sure if it's going to have 4 drive motors or just 2 with belts. But yeah, it's going to have 4 wheels, period.
Yeah. Let's see. Everyone's up in arms about our Chomp reference. Well, I mean, it's great to have self-rating, but if you're constantly on the ground doing that, it doesn't really help anything.
Chomp isn't ready for prime time. Prove me wrong.
All right. Talk about Hobby King having an issue with brushless motors being discontinued randomly.
Yeah.
Is that an issue?
It's an issue. The thing about Hobby King is without going into the whole supply chain, they do very large, limited runs with the parts they have. So if they find a specific bearing, or if they find a specific stator or something like that, they basically will just do a huge run of them, and if there's any, they don't do any engineering design changes. If there's a change, they just say screw it, and they just make a whole new motor. So yes, things will get discontinued. So typically what I do is I buy 2 of every motor, which sucks. I buy 2 of every motor, test them out, see which one works, and then immediately buy like 4 others. For Ant and Beetles, it's actually pretty easy because they're usually only like, 15, 20 bucks, something like that. But yeah, it is a problem. If you find a motor that you rely on, like these little pancake guys, I'm going to be relying on them because there's nothing in that form factor. If you're that specific, you really, really need to buy a bunch of these because it could go out of stock. And I did that with Sergeant Cuddles. I had like 4 or 5 extras of the weapon motor, even though I'd only ever broken 1, just because I was worried about that being discontinued.
Oh, there's a little panic attack toy.
That panic attack's like crap. I don't know, it's been long enough, and that was overseas. I'll think about it, but I like panic attack. It's perfect.
We can add an exclamation point so it doesn't mess up the bot ranks.
Ah.
Panic attack!
Panic attack.
Oh.
Well, no, because it's like panic and then attack.
Okay.
You get it?
Yeah, sure. I think we're caught up.
Cool.
For the most part.
Wait, pun. Who said something about puns?
Me.
Oh. Back to the pun drawing board. Yeah, I think, panic attack is good. I guess we could have like anxiety attack.
Anxiety attack would be good.
Because actually anxiety attack might be good because like literally I'm thinking of like a 12-inch long bar with some other things I'll go into later. But when that thing's at full speed, it's going to sound really, really nasty. So there might be some kind of anxiety.
Yeah, I actually like that. I think
Anxiety
that's a good
attack?
solution.
Yeah,
Anxiety attack.
Because it's going to sound really nasty and loud.
Yeah.
So.
Cool beans. Yeah.
Hi, Zeph. What are you doing?
Oh, anxiety attack. That's really hard to say.
Anxiety attack.
Anxiety.
Ooh, Eric had a good question.
Yes. If you could start over on Sergeant Cuddles, what would you do differently?
If I could start over on Sergeant Cuddles, I would take away the UHMW frame, not because I didn't like it. I think that was one of Sergeant Cuddles' selling features was the UHMW frame, but it was also insanely limiting. When I did Sergeant Cuddles 3, which was the titanium bar, one of the biggest things I wanted to do was make it 4-wheel drive. I didn't go with 4-wheel drive because there's just no way I had that extra weight. However, if I went over to a 3D printed Nylon X or something as a chassis, I could fit in 4-wheel drive, and a 4-wheel drive crippling depression, Sergeant Cuddles, 4-wheel drive Sergeant Cuddles would have been my ideal. So if I was going to resurrect it, I would do 4-wheel drive, probably still with like the little N20s because they worked okay for me, but I would go 4-wheel direct with the N20s and then do carbon fiber chassis. That's probably would be my next iteration.
Okie dokie. I think that's it.
Oh, Ricky was asking about the axe.
Oh yeah,
That
that was a prop.
was a prop. I don't really use it for much.
Oh, the sugar roasted it out.
Yeah. What was this for even?
We were doing a zombie crawl for
Oh,
Halloween one
yeah.
year, and so we bloodied up a cheap axe
Yeah.
as a prop.
Yeah, I don't use axes much, but it's good eyes. I have to start hiding things on the pegboard.
Warwick says Chomp's gonna make top 16. Yeah. That's controversy on all the judging stuff.
I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. Has Chomp ever really been challenged? Like, okay, Chomp versus Tombstone. Let's see that just once. Chomp versus Ice Wave. That'd be pretty cool. I mean, Chomp versus any high energy. We just really haven't seen it. I mean, there was, what was the last one? I don't know. I don't dislike Chomp. It's just...
It's amazing.
It's not on the caliber.
But, yeah.
And, okay, let me rephrase this. I think it's exactly on the caliber of the other robots. It's probably better than most because it is reliable. We've never seen Chomp just drive around in a circle.
Yes.
not on purpose. I think it's technically perfect. Technically it's fine. It's just not in the right competition. It's not a combat robot, it's something else.
It could almost be in like low energy weapon. What is it? Sportsman.
Oh, sportsman, yeah. It's like the ultimate
it's an epic
sportsman.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just not what I would consider a full combat robot.
Yeah, and it is durable. It's just the center of gravity is so terrible.
Chomp vs. Huge was pretty epic. That was nice.
Yeah. If you built a heavyweight for BattleBots, what kind of weapon would you build? You kind of did that. It's just big crippling depression.
Yeah. The idea for my heavyweight right now is just a scaled up crippling depression. Obviously not just, everything, 2.3 times bigger because it's 8 times. Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, I'm not just going to scale it up. The idea behind it is to actually design it for heavyweight, but still kind of the undercutter, 4-wheel drive kind of thing. That's the idea for the heavy.
Double Dutch?
Double Dutch, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Just looked up pictures of Double Dutch. That design is right up your alley. That is a really unique design. That's cool.
Yeah, Double Dutch is cool. I don't know. The problem I have with a lot of those big undercutters, like I know Russ Barrow does all those with Dark Pounder and all that stuff. I like that design. I don't feel it's me because there's not enough size or not enough space for all the redundancy. Like if you really look at the redundancy in the weapon drive for crippling depression, it's overkill. I'm using a lot of really, really big components for a 30-pounder. I think that's kind of more up my alley is just robustness. And I actually did think about doing something like a Double Dutch, but I just wasn't sure how to fit all the redundancy in there. Who's Valkyrie? Valkyrie is a great example of a really neat undercutter, but that head that juts out, that just makes me nervous. I don't like having that limited amount of, I want more space to keep that weapon solid. How about that?
No.
It's like Spirit. It's kind of like the wedge shaped with the huge undercutter disc and the 2 wheels in back.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is really hard to Google image combat robots.
Yeah.
You just get a bunch of Gundams. Let's see.
I feel that's
yeah.
my other good point is everyone goes through the exact same phases when designing combat robots, and so you design a robot and you're like, oh, I'm gonna have this weapon in front. It's like, oh, you're gonna be vulnerable from the back. Oh, another weapon in back. And one of my first designs was a triangle with 3 drums on, a drum on each face. And it's like, oh, no matter where they hit me, I'm gonna hit them. But then you realize that there's just gonna be 3 really awful drums. That's it. You're just gonna have 3 really terrible weapons that won't work. So, yeah. I like the singular weapon, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, is if you design one weapon and you're vulnerable somewhere else, you're going to address that vulnerability. Whereas, you look at Double Dutch, it's like, what about those wheels on the side? What if it's not perfectly squared up with someone and you get the wheels hit, you're 100% done. Like that thing cannot take a hit to the wheels, a good hit to the wheels. So you're really not saving anything by doing that. I think Valkyrie is another example, really, really neat robot, but its drive isn't maybe the strongest that it could be. Those wheels are very vulnerable. It has a ton of bite, significantly more bite than most undercutters, but then you have really, really vulnerable wheels, and if that thing ever goes up on its side, the chassis spins around it, making it really vulnerable. So it's always a trade-off, and I would opt for less big hits. I like, maneuverability is number 1 for me now. Number 2 is reliability, 3 is durability, and then 4 is starting to get down into damage and stuff. But I'm just really tired of showing people combat robots and it's 2 bots doing this for 2 minutes, and they're just like that. I'm really tired of that, and I think that needs to stop in this hobby. People need to stop that. We need to get to robots that can go the 3 minutes, drive the 3 minutes. If the weapon breaks, it happens. But I really want to see a day and age when every robot can just last the 3 minutes except for knockouts. That would be cool.
I really think that's down to just the support and the infrastructure that's growing in this hobby.
Yeah.
If we could get like junior leagues going, or just more and more competitions where people can test things in kind of a lower risk, lower competitiveness, and then for real big events can actually be vetted. I think we're moving towards that.
Yeah, it's getting a lot better, but yeah.
Yeah.
I think everyone was designing robots to hit as hard as possible and be as fast as possible, because in combat robotics, generally the theme is to push everything as far as you can do. You know, like, what if this is just pulling 300 amps? And the goal is to just get things as pushed far forward, but I think we maybe need to scale that back and not hit these super high KE numbers, not hit these super high current numbers, and just make it more robust. And that's why Duck is one of my favorites.
Warwick asks, any thoughts on applying to Kingabots?
I am not really all that interested in going over to China to compete. I've talked with Casey a lot and Zach and people that have gone to China, and it seems like fun and it would be cool, but it's not in my wheelhouse as things I want to accomplish. So
You want BattleBots, you want US.
Well, it's not that I want US, it's just I want BattleBots, and I don't want to mess with how the Chinese competitions are run. They're very different, and I just kind of want to build a 250, bring it somewhere and fight it, and if there's a show around it, that's really cool, but I don't like the format of the Chinese shows personally. I'm fine watching them, but that's not what I would want to be involved in.
Yeah. Rockin' the mic.
Rock in the mic.
Oh.
Rockin'
wow. Okay. Do you think a Senowayachi style robot could be turned into an Antweight?
Oh yeah, I think Senowayachi would actually work really well as an Antweight.
I love that design.
It's a great design. The biggest issue that you're going to have, I want to do a spinner calculation video to kind of show like how to calculate all this stuff. But in an Antweight, if you start moving that weight further and further out, I think you're going to have a hard time finding a motor that has enough torque to get that thing spinning. If you look really closely at Senowayachi, hello honey! If you look really closely at Senowayachi, it actually has, I think, 3 or 4 motors around the base that are driving that central hub. And that's just kind of stuff that is not practical in an Antweight. So you actually might need to do like 2, 3 motors maybe, or get like a really big oversized pancake to get that thing spinning. But it would be cool.
Where we're talking, just trying to get everyone to buy D2 kits. No D2.
I actually am thinking about buying a D2 kit to put in that test box and just make specific weapons for D2. I'm really sick of D2s. Isaac Maylers, he has full STLs for it, and he's actually 3D printed like a full D2, just for geometry, just so you can see the geometry. I think D2 kits, I'm not fine with wedges. I don't really like all wedges, but I like, Duck, I like Whoops, I like robots that have a different twist on it. But I think D2 kits, for the record, are against the spirit of the competition. They're not combat robots. They're test bots. They're test bots. That's all they are. They're not combat robots, and they shouldn't be in the arena.
Just read that.
I would download a D2 kit. I totally would.
That's good. Yeah, talking about Junior League, and we do need more arenas. Just overall, it sucks that they're so expensive, but maybe with it being televised and more popular, that companies might jump more on board. I think it would make a lot of sense for big hobby chain stores to start having their own competitions.
Well, I don't understand why, like, you couldn't go to the YMCA or, like, your local rec center, and they wouldn't have or a school, and they wouldn't just have, like, a little combat arena, because in the end of the day, how much do you think like a climbing wall costs? How much do you think a racquetball court costs? Granted, it's a wider audience that you're appealing to, but the cost of an arena really isn't that much for a business or a company or something like that. I think eventually we're going to hit the day to where it is common that like a hackerspace will have one, or a rec center will have one, and that will be really cool for people to test out designs. But then some idiot's going to put a 30-pounder in there and break the arena and kill someone. And,
Yeah, we gotta be careful.
you know, there's always going to be something stupid.
Yeah. TMO Productions asks, do you have any suggestions for making your electrical system reliable? At Horde, his amp would not turn on despite using high-end electronics. Had to wire a whole new setup.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues that I think people see in ants and beetles, it's not wiring, it's not quality of connections, it's nothing like that. I think the biggest thing that people see is, well, a little bit of that. What am I thinking of? Battery eliminator circuit, BECs. I suffered from this. Remember the very first time I turned on Sergeant Cuddles at Robo Games, I turned it on, hit that weapon, and then it cut out. Unfortunately, the BECs that are on a lot of speed controllers just aren't up to the task of being in with all the other electronics. I don't want to go into the details, but getting a reliable radio and getting a very reliable battery or power system to that radio, I think solves 90% of all the electronic issues. Beyond there, don't rigidly attach all this stuff, especially 100% only in the Beetle and the Antweight classes. Don't bolt stuff down, just pad it in foam. Put a bunch of foam around. It's not going to heat up appreciably to where that's going to be an issue.
In 3 minutes.
Yeah, in 3 minutes. So I just use like ESD foam, like that pink foam, and I just kind of wrap everything loosely around it. A really light, 5-gram ESC that's bouncing around inside foam, it's not going to break. It's just not going to fail like that.
Well, and use heat shrink to help bolster any soldered connections, stuff like that.
Yeah, so my general game plan is I use bullet connectors for everything, which are fine, but I do bullet connectors, and then I do electrical tape over top of them, and then usually I will bend them back and then put them inside the robot like that. So even if they want to pull out, it has to pull like that, so you can just kind of tape the connectors together, do that, then tape around here. That connector's not going anywhere. Strain relief is another big one. And, I'm going to say this, learn how to solder. There's so many times I'm in the pits where it's someone's first time soldering and they just don't know what the hell they're doing, and it's just a cold solder joint. Don't avoid soldering when building insect classes. The first thing you should do if you're starting out with combat robots, get a soldering iron and learn how to solder. Don't avoid it. Collier Wallace, that kid that's always on Facebook, he's like not wanting to do soldering. Guess what? You're going to go in the pits, you're going to have an issue, and you're going to need to know how to solder. That isn't the time to learn. Start with your skills first, then start building your robot. And you need soldering as a skill.
Yes.
Learn how to do it.
Cool. Yeah, truth. So, I don't, do you know what a mini mag is? I know I actually has like 8 mini mags.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a brushless motor, flow.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
Cool.
And I think Casey was telling me that Bite Force we're using like a perm or something like that, one of the big motors, and they switched over to a set of like 4 mini mags that they custom geared in one. So that's why Bite Force it's all brushed. But it's just a bunch of mini mags together. At least that's what I heard.
Cool. Warwick asks, what did you end up using as the base and walls for the test arena?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to do a full video of this, but let me give you guys a really quick rundown.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just kind of posted a picture. How's that look? 5, 4, 3, 2.
Still walking over there.
So let's see.
You see a lot of the ladder, but you still see the boxes, okay.
So here is the test arena. This is made to be relatively simple to build and relatively inexpensive. 3/4-inch MDF all around. These are Simpson strong ties. These are found like in the deck section of Home Depot, so just go look for where the decking is. And I've got 2 of these corner braces on every single side, and that basically forms the structure. What's interesting is these come down to the floor, and you might be able to see, I don't know if the camera can see that, but there's a gap at the bottom, and so these things actually stand off about 1/8 of an inch off the floor, and so the whole arena, literally, I can't pick it up, it just rests on top of the floor. So if I want to replace the floor, it's actually not bolted or touching anything. I just lift the whole arena up, take the floor panels out, put new floor panels in, and that's done. And the floor itself is, oh, that's kind of cool. The floor itself is 1/8 inch MDF, and it's just taped in that center seam from the underneath, and the floor cost me about $12 to replace the whole floor. So when I gouge up this floor and destroy it, it just cost me 12 bucks. This is 2 foot by 4 foot, so all I have to do is get 2 of these pieces, slap them underneath the arena, set the arena on top, and I'm done. And the top is 1/4 inch Lexan, and then just with a center bar. I will eventually do like little hinges to hold this on, but I'm not doing anything vertical spinning right now. But I'd say the whole thing cost me like $250 to put together, so it's not super cheap, but it's also pretty good size. It's 4 by 2 by 2.
Lots of discussions about.
John.
Oh well, yeah, for a bit there. See, can't really complain about D2s tied to the win-loss ratio. And
Yeah, so I mean, my thing about D2s is I hear a lot of people saying like I don't mind them, things like that. I don't think they're against the rules, and I don't mind them. I just don't understand why you would go into combat robots and buy a kit. That's fine. Buy a kit that everyone else has because it does well. Like, come on, 2 D2 kits fighting against each other?
boring.
Who wants to watch that? Raise your hand if you actually want to watch that match. No one wants to watch that. So I don't understand why you would buy a D2 kit and be like, hell yeah, I'm competing with a D2. Like, it's fine to get into the sport. Not everyone can build this stuff, but I would much prefer a 2x4 with some motors bolted on it and just duct taped than a D2. You know, like, I don't know, be creative, make something with what you have. I much prefer that over just buying a D2 because, oh, I'm going to win. Like, that's just not the point of the hobby, to me.
Yeah.
I like the creativity of it.
Yeah. TML talking about thanks for the advice on the BEC stuff. Let's see. Yeah, test arena.
Ooh, building for featherweight. Nice. What are you building? Tommy Cat?
Tommy Cat. That's cool. Underdog pick for making top 16.
It depends on who you want to call underdog.
I mean, huge is kind of for being new.
But I think that's kind of, maybe it's obvious
really
now. I think Duck. I think Duck. A lot of people I don't, like we as builders, like I'm assuming everyone here watching is kind of a builder, knows a little bit more. They started BattleBots with Duck being like a joke robot, like the hamburger guy. I think Duck is way up there in terms of like top 5, maybe top 3. So I think, if you want to look at Duck as an underdog, for anyone that doesn't know who Duck is, I'd say Duck is my underdog. Other underdogs would be, I don't know, like, I want to say like Endgame, but I wouldn't call them an underdog.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't really think.
What do you think is going to happen with this, the Desperado?
Oh,
whatever. Yeah.
Well, I think Gigabyte's going to get the Desperado.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Gigabyte's going to
Yeah,
get it.
that was kind of smart for them.
Maybe this Bronco character, I don't know if you guys have seen this Bronco, it's like a little flip lifter guy. Bronco's looking pretty good. I don't know. I think they're kind of underrated.
Oh, good point with Joshua. Replace the wedge with spikes and stick balloons on the back for D2 kits. Yeah, like there's a place for that. And that's fun. Practice driving, do it for the kids, all that stuff.
Oh yeah, and that's what we do at Steam Fest every year. Like D2s have a purpose. Like I would totally get one as a test robot to fight against because they're really good at that. But I don't understand the concept of getting excited fighting one in real combat. I don't know.
Yeah. Tommy Cat's doing a vertical spinner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
How do you guys feel about Hypershock? Tyler asks.
Hypershock is gorgeous.
It's so pretty.
It's I don't know if I ever told you this, but my early sketches of crippling depression looked almost identical to Hypershock, but as an underdrive or undercutter. I really liked the design of it. I really like the robot, but oh my god, don't tell Will Bales. But there's just too much focus on the look of it, like the tires. The tires bounce all over the place. They look amazing, and it's the perfect tire to put on there, but it's the wrong tire to use for combat. And I feel like a little bit too much focus went into the design elements and not for I'm gonna win this competition. So really like Hypershock though, really do.
Yeah, people talking about Duck, Last Rites versus Whoops. Yeah, we were there for that. That was insane.
We were in front of the glass about like 3 seats up.
Crazy.
Dead in front of the glass. Duck came right towards us, or Whoops came right towards us. So yeah, that's my, Petunia!
Petunia! That's my pick for underdog. I love
Petunia's
Petunia.
pretty okay. There's 0 chance that they can win BattleBots.
Yeah.
0. There's 0 chance that they can get in the top 5. But they could get in the 16 and they could have some good fights. And that's what matters.
Yeah. I like Crushers. Let's see.
It's going to be a dog here in a couple seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2.
It's Zipper! Let's see. How do you go about calculating your battery capacity for your robots? Is there a calculator for it or just simple math?
A little bit of both. Look up Ask Aaron. I think there's a couple battery calculators on Ask Aaron's website. If you haven't been to Ask Aaron's website, definitely do that. Just Google Ask Aaron calculator, something like that. I have a spinner calculator that actually Zach of Poison Arrow gave me, and I can't share that with anyone. But basically what I do is, I mean, every weight class has a capacity, right? Every weight class kind of has a capacity, like Beetles, I think like 850 to 1 amp is kind of where you want to be. I think for Antweight's 350 milliamp hours is kind of a good place to be. Once you start going beyond there, what I typically do is I think I add up all my drive. So if I have like, 10 amp on the drive, I assume like a 30% or 25% duty cycle on the drive. So if my drive goes up to 20 amps, then a 25% duty cycle would be 5 amps. So I say, okay, 5 amps continuous for the full 3 minutes, and then the weapon, I do like a 30% or 50% duty cycle on that. You can kind of just get an idea. If you're doing like a vertical spinner, maybe you don't have a lot of ramp ups. Maybe it's not always at full speed. I just kind of do some loose math on that, and you kind of end up where you want to be. I focus more on the, this needs to be a battery video. I focused more on the discharge rate. So let's say you have a 1 amp hour battery that has a 10C discharge. So 1 times 10 equals 10 amps. So it has a discharge current of 10 amps. Is that enough for your weapon? If your weapon needs more than 10 amps, you either need a higher discharge or higher capacity. One of those needs to be higher. So if you start getting into 50C discharge and you have a 1 amp battery, that's 50 times 1, that's 50 amps. If your weapon needs more than 50 amps, it's not going to be practical to go significantly higher than a 50C discharge, because 50C discharge is actually really, really high, and you might not always see that. So then you're going to want to increase the capacity. So it's kind of a game between capacity and discharge, because you might not know this, but it is really the capacity times discharge that equals the amount of current you can deliver. So if you keep the discharge rate at 50, but then increase to a 1.5 amp, then you now increase your max current capacity. So kind of a balance between all those things.
Yeah. Warwick asks, have you ever considered doing a multi-bot?
Yeah. So I think I've said this before in a couple of forums, but crippling depression is the obvious multi-bot. One of the reasons I built a 30-pounder is so I could do 60-pound at Robo Games by doing 2 crippling depressions. Now, of course, it would be crippling depression and something manic, but it would be manic depressive. Manic depressive would be the multi-bot of crippling depression and some other robot. I just haven't quite got there yet. But that was the idea behind the 60-pounder, and that's why crippling depression is so heavily armored for a 30-pounder, is because it was kind of meant to be a possibility of a multi-bot at 60.
Tyler asks, how do you feel about robots with saws as weapons? Do you see them as effective or just for show? Well, it depends on who you're talking about.
Yeah, I like saws for weapons. The only thing keeping me from making a saw as a weapon is Kim, right here. She's kind of talked me out of it, but I actually see a lot of potential as a saw for a weapon, but it has to be done right. And I think a lot of people used to do saws as weapon when they couldn't figure out, like they didn't have the means to do a weapon. They didn't know how to machine a drum, but they're like, oh, but I can go to the hardware store and get a saw. So what I want to see is people that can build a very heavy-duty weapon take that same design and make a saw. And I think saw blades is a perfect example of that. I think saw bots are a lot like crippling depression, to where I haven't gotten these spectacular knockouts to where the robot's ripped in two, but if you talk to the builders and look at the underneath sides and how all the screw heads are gone, crippling depression does kind of a different level of damage. And I think saws are a lot like that. The saw can sit there for 2 minutes and do nothing and then nick a wire and you're done.
Yep.
So saw bots are different. You're not like breaking chunks off, you're strategically hitting one little thing that makes the whole robot die, which is very difficult to do with just a standard impact. So I love saws, and I will make a saw sometime in the future, just not right now.
Yeah, Eric says saws are useless without dustpans. I agree.
Yeah.
You have to have excellent driving skills and some sort of means to capture people.
Yep. You need, if anyone's ever done any metal cutting, if you just take the blade and just rest it on what you're cutting, you make a lot of sparks, but you're just going to basically sand the finish down. You really need significant downward pressure, therefore you need some clamp against it. So yeah, you have to have, like Red Devil has the forks and the saw, that's good. You need to be able to feed the saw in, so yeah, that's critical.
Aspa?
Oh, Asbots are just like really shitty, quickly put together, put them together.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Charles came up with Asbots.
That's funny.
Yeah, it's just a quick, like, Kamikaze was technically an Asbot.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Turnigy graphene batteries?
Yeah, I use Turnigy graphenes, that's what crippling depression has, and I really like them. I was kind of worried about the battery system. I wanted to go a lot higher with the battery, but I actually might scale down the batteries because those graphenes have been very good to me. I've had no issues with spin up or anything like that.
Andy's saying that max amps are better suited for heavies.
Oh yeah, max amps, yeah. Nanotechs, yeah, I've got I don't have all my batteries here, but yeah, I've got nanotechs, I've got graphenes. I don't have any max amps because I haven't done big stuff.
Yogan asks, how did you get into CNC milling? Did you have a Bridgeport or work in a machine shop?
Neither of those. I got into machining a long time ago before I ever got into any of this stuff. I was building audio amplifiers, and I was outsourcing a lot of stuff, and I wanted to like do my own faceplates and do my own enclosures at home. So I bought a round column mill from Harbor Freight, bought that home, took windshield wiper motors, put them on the axes, and had like these really basic speed controllers on that, and basically kind of made my own rudimentary little CNC setup, and then kind of got bored of that, dropped the project, it was too much money, whatever, and then very recently got another mill off Craigslist. This is like maybe 5 years ago, something like that. Bought a little mill off Craigslist and actually legitimately got back into it. Converted that over to CNC, used that to build a bigger machine that I converted over to CNC, and then eventually Tormach approached me for a sponsorship. But yeah, I've just kind of been self-taught, and I am not a machinist, I'm not very good at it. It's something you just kind of got to stumble through and play around a lot and learn.
Watch a lot of videos. Do you think how you beat huge in 30-pound would work for heavyweight?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Every robot has a critical design flaw, no question.
Yeah.
Huge has that as a critical design flaw. It is two halves that have one shaft running through, just the nature of how it's going to function. All the stresses of the robot are on that one shaft. Now, I think Jonathan said he had like a 2-inch titanium or something crazy like that. That's fine. But I think that's going to be the problem with huge, is that middle joint. And that's, it's fine. Every robot has an Achilles heel. The other thing I thought of is I don't know if I want to 100% give this away, but the wheels are a lot more important than people might think on Huge, and no one's really made a mechanism to go directly after the wheels. But if I was on BattleBots, I would go out and get a pair of garden shears and literally put a linear actuator on it. All you have to do is push them against the wall, cut one of those spokes. The weapon's right in the middle. If one of those spokes fails, it's going to lean down and the weapon's going to drag, and then Huge is yours. So
put a stick in the spokes.
put a stick in the spokes. Yeah, there's a lot of options that are non-traditional options that don't work against anyone else but would work against Huge, and that's Huge's success, is you have to fight it in a very different way. But yeah, I still really truly think that that overhead hit, the same way he hit me, would work on the right robot. I'm gonna go grab some, I'll show you. So I want to show people basically what Huge hit and why it didn't do a whole lot.
I will point out that the big version, they're driving it is a lot better than the 30-pound too.
I think
30-pound kind of flopped around a lot more.
Yeah, I think the scale just works better.
Yeah.
It's just a better scale.
Warwick says that Huge looked like it was about to crumble in the end of the chomp fight.
Yeah. So I don't have...
What are you looking for?
Looking for my other bearing. I don't have the right bearing. But here's... So yeah, this is the weapon hub taken apart. And this is one of the bearings that got busted. Let me try and put this together. But this is basically the bearing assembly for crippling depression outside. And I've never really shown it outside of the robot like this before, but that's basically what you're dealing with. And each one of these bearings is a 1/4 pound, which is insane amount of weight for a 30-pounder to have tied up in here. It was a really big decision to have this much weight in there, but you've got 2 of these bearings, and then so the thing's pretty small. So if you think of this upside down, you've got a 1/2-inch piece of S7 hitting into this, hitting into another 1/2 pound's worth of bearings. There really wasn't a place for anything to go. So if you're chopping down, you know, like then from overhead, hitting straight down, you're just hitting into a big hunk. And the block up front is another couple pounds worth of solid aluminum. So yeah, the weakest link is always going to break, and just up top that was going to break because it was all much thinner than what I had. So I think that's still a possibility if you just hit a big solid mass.
We're coming up on 2 hours here, so
cool.
And I think we've answered all the questions I can see.
Let me do a little quick teaser.
Oh yeah.
So I'll be right back.
CD?
Yep.
Teaser time. Any last minute questions? I want to get in here while he's going to get his teaser. Questions?
Let's see here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And plug your guy.
Yeah. So some of you may or may not know that recently I was asking for like machinists outside. I didn't really have enough time, or I didn't want to spend the time remachining Crippling Depression for yet a 3rd time. So I actually outsourced it, and one of my followers / Patreon supporters, Jason Hughes of Sandhill CNC, actually offered to help me out with the machining. I did pay him, this isn't a favor, but he kind of got into combat robots from watching my stuff, and so he wanted to help out with the machining. So I sent him the files, and I just got them back yesterday, and so I want to kind of tease. The new Crippling Depression is going to be very, very different. So let me see if I can set up the camera just to give you a quick view of the new, very pretty, very shiny pieces. Yeah, it's close enough. So here are the pieces for crippling depression. As you will see, they are actually not flat. They're kind of angled. There's angles everywhere. So I've got all these really cool scallops in here. So yeah, the design is kind of different, but these are really neat. So this is a side panel. So the drive pod actually kind of snaps or fits inside of here a little bit. So that's the side, that's another side. And then here is the new faceplate for crippling depression. So fun fact, 6061, 6061, 6061, and the front is now all solid 7, well not solid, but the front is actually 7075 now because I was getting hit in the front quite a bit. So that is what the front looks like. Obviously you have the weapon recess down there, and then I have the new back plate, and these are all I think 5/8 inch thick. 5/8 to up to 3/4 of an inch thick, and here is the new back plate for crippling depression.
And folks are asking about the truck bed liner. We're probably not going to do that again.
Yep, I'm not going to do truck bed liner. I feel like it might have actually helped deflect a few of the hits. Stuff might have bounced off of it a little bit, but I think the weapons are just so powerful that it really wasn't worth doing. So I'm skipping that for now.
And are we painting, or were we actually going to do vinyl?
I think this is going to be painted. I think I'm going to paint this. One of the ideas I had was that with all the facets that are on here, we're going to see how much effort I want to do. But I was going to do maybe a gloss on one surface and then do a matte on the other surfaces. So basically just tape off one surface, paint it one way, tape off the other and paint a different way. I kind of want maybe the facets to be really shiny and the rest of it to be flat. But yeah, I'm still going to stick with that kind of black depressing theme, but this might have an interesting paint job, we'll see.
We have a question about using Flexaseal on ants and beetles, talking about that truck bed liner. Do you think that would translate?
I think so. I think the Antweight classes or the insect classes, a lot of that stuff works a lot better. So yeah, I think it could be good.
Eric asked, were there holes in the backplate on earlier versions? Yes.
No.
No?
No.
Wait, which ones?
So I'll show you the original backplate.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the recess for the resin
yeah.
junk.
I think I have a backplate here.
Oh, these holes? Oh, the pinholes?
Yeah, so this is the original backplate.
That's so much bigger.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so crippling depression actually has some pretty significant design changes. So here is version 2. This is the backplate for version 2, and here's the backplate for version 3. Let's see if I can. Okay, yeah, so it did show up.
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty big difference between the two. A lot smaller. So I actually shed a pretty significant amount of material weight by getting rid of some of the empty space on the inside of the robot. So that's why you'll notice that everything swoops down and back. If we look at it kind of like that, you can see that it cuts down quite a bit. I've cut down a lot of excess space in the robot, and thus cut off a lot of aluminum that was just weight that didn't really do anything for me.
Let's see. 3D printed new things to the CR10 to make it better. Do you have it stock? You do have the Fang thing.
Yeah, I'll mention that really quickly about the CR10. Let me see if I can go over here. I do have a couple little upgrades on it. Since this was primarily a PLA machine, I do have the Fang little layer cooler fan. I've got that on it. I don't think I have anything else modified. I have a couple little things, like I've got all the Noctura fans on here, which are significantly quieter. But other than that, I pretty much left the CR10 stock because it worked fine stock. I see a lot of people messing with them, upgrading them and changing stuff out, but they don't really get any better prints out of it. This got me pretty good prints. I was happy with where this was at. For the money, for the price, this was fine.
How will you attach an overhead bar on Panic Attack so it won't fly off?
That's a really complicated question. I think the short answer to this, how I was going to attach the bar, I'm going to have a cap that bolts into the top of the motor that will have a groove that goes around the outside, and then a flanged bearing will lock into that groove and hold it down. So it will support it radially and axially. I have to mock this up, but that's the idea for right now, is using flanged bearings with a groove to hold it in place, and then the weapon will just attach down into that top hat. Yeah.
Probably last-ish question, whatever happened to the 3D printer you were rebuilding, the Stratasys?
Yeah, I've given up on the Stratasys. I have not enough time, too many projects, and I just didn't want to throw a bunch of extra time and money into a printer that was, you know, an 8-inch cube that's made for ABS, which I never use. So I ended up buying the Formbot instead. I'm pretty happy with the Formbot. I'm going to be doing some kind of large enclosure for it because ultimately I want to make larger pieces. Case in point, I'll show you that.
Ah.
And then we'll end it.
Yeah.
So here is a fully 3D printed chassis for the new version of Crippling Depression. So I needed to be able to print these large, and you can see this has a seam in the middle because this was printed on the CR10, but I wanted to be able to print these large scale pieces, and so having a larger 3D printer actually helps me a lot more than having a much more accurate one. I think that's it.
Yeah.
We'll be doing another one of these for sure, of course. But as always, thanks for coming, thanks for watching, thanks for asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
Thank Kim.
Yay.
Yay, indeed. So yeah, any other last minute questions?
You might have a buyer for your CR10 if you want to ship it
Oh,
for a
okay.
makerspace, which would be cool.
Okay.
You can get with you.
Plastic class 30 pounders.
Oh, good.
Trust me, the frame of this doesn't weigh that much, but I kind of did the math on this. Could I enter Crippling Depression in a 30 or a 15 pound class if I do Nylon X for the whole frame? If I do Nylon X for the frame and do just like a little weapon bar in front, I could maybe get it in a 15 pound class, still with the weapon block, still with the dual motor, still with the drive. I might be able to hit 15 pounds and that thing would just be horrible. So
I forgot we have to end the stream. Oh no!
Now I got that down. You want to see it end? You want to see it end? Count down from 10.
Thanks everyone. We'll see if we can do this now.
1 and end.